My name is Jon Wolske, and as mentioned, I am a culture evangelist. And so you might say, what exactly is a culture evangelist, right? I did, in fact, get to make up my own title. So, what did I do? Let's see. I'm not a Mac guy. I'm just going to start off with that for you. Is it going? It's going. Let's see. There, we're controlling that. Hey, look at that. We have the technology. So, I'm a musician as well. Just passionate about sharing and sharing music with God and for God. And didn't know that when I was 16 and started playing, but pretty quickly found that playing at church was an outlet that you can have, and that's been an amazing blessing. And then I am the father to Imogen, the sweet little girl over there, and she's a kind of huge part of the last few years of our story that we'll talk about. And I'll tell you, just to be honest, I'm a bad Christian, right? So I've been in the rock and roll world for many, many years, so oftentimes the language that I use, it's not the language that I should be using. I'll be honest, right? Often I don't think, what does the Bible say about this until maybe after the fact that I've made the wrong choice. I'm really good at holding grudges. But in retrospect, the one thing that I think I've done really well with is surrender. And it's the hardest thing, and I've wanted to write a song about surrender, and I just can't. I just can't find the right words to say, we should just give in, and he's got a great plan for us. But I think in retrospect, I've actually done that, which is pretty awesome. when I think about all the stuff that I can work on, is surrender. And how do you surrender? Do you know what it means to actually surrender, to say, you know what, God, I'm yours, and it's all yours, and let's see what happens. It's kind of scary, isn't it? Right? Because you think, well, no, I've got to build up my skill set and get a job that works on my skill set, and I've got to control what happens in the future, right? I've got to put all this into it, and guess what? You do, but you also don't. At the same time that you're building up those skills, you're being told to build those skills. You're being helped along the way. So my story really starts with plans. How many people here like plans? Making plans? We all like making plans. And then I'll just read this off in case you can't see it. So if you're not a fan of the Awkward Yeti, they're some of the coolest, funnest cartoons. So the head is saying, heart, the key to success in life is having a plan and sticking to it. And then, of course, it rains, and that makes it hard to read the plan. And then lightning zaps the plan. And the heart says, I don't think that the life really cares about your plan, right? And the brain's still holding on and says, but wait, it had bullet points, right? That plan was really important. Does life really care about your plans? It's not that they don't care and they want to trash them. It's that they actually have something so much better for you than you could ever imagine, than you could ever write down in your plans. So I think my whole story, if you look at, and we're going to talk about the calling a lot, right? And it's hard to prove that you've ever been called for anything, right? We'll talk about that a bit too. But really, I was born in Canada, so if we have any other Canadians in the house, happy Canada Day. It's Canada Day today. It's kind of like our Independence Day. We do the whole barbecue and fireworks and stuff. But even moving from Canada in 1990 to Maryland, to the United States, was what got me into music. Now, I probably would have gotten into music anyway, but I found it because we moved, and now we had all this stuff from our home boxed up, and I found a cassette tape. Do you guys know what that is? You remember those? I found a cassette tape, and it was a guy who played bass with my parents in a church group years before that, but it wasn't a church tape. It was a studio project. It was the most groovy Southern rock stuff that you've ever heard. And it was the first time I listened to what the bass was doing in music because of the connection with Steve, the bass player. And at 16, I was on fire to learn music. And like I said, I'm sure I would have found it, as much as I love it now, but I found it then, and it helped me through a really hard time. I didn't want to move to a different country. I didn't want to have to make new friends 2 weeks before school started. But even that move helped me find music. It helped me find my wife, right? If I still lived in Canada, I wouldn't be married to Kelly, right? And I wouldn't have Imogen. So you think about all these pieces, and if you look back and you go, man, you know what? That move when I was 13 years old was a part of this bigger, more awesome plan. I wouldn't be in Las Vegas. I'm almost certain of it. So even playing at church didn't come as man, I love church. I've been going to church my whole life, which I have been, right? And that's, I think, why I'm a bad Christian. Because I've just been going to church my whole life. My parents have been involved with leadership at church my whole life. I was 18. I'd been playing in bands around my small town, and my dad started singing at a contemporary Christian service. And I had stopped going to church because I had a car, I had a job, right? I had an excuse. And my dad was singing at this church, and I was like, some Saturday that I'm off, because it was a Saturday evening service, I'm going to come and check this thing out. And so my dad said, okay, cool. And I said, Dad, next Saturday I'm off. I'm going to come and see this service. And I got there, and my bass guitar was on stage because their bass player called out. And my dad was like, John can handle this stuff. So it wasn't even like, man, I didn't get to see a service and say, this is so cool, I want to be a part of it. It was more like there was a need in that church, and God was plugging me in. And at 18, I wouldn't have ever told you that. Like, oh, this is cool, this is part of a plan. I played for 10 years at Christ United Methodist Church. And I got to a point where out of 4 services, I was playing at 3 of them. Guitar or bass, doing sound. And it got me back involved with church life. It got me back involved with church leadership, and it got me thinking differently on a daily basis. So you got to say that's part of somebody's plan, right? Because I could have just been rock and roll all the time and gone down that path, which I did have my fun. So it was when when I met my wife, actually, that things really changed. So I was going to be the party guy, the rock and roll guy. I was going to be the uncle that brought a different aunt to every family function, right? That wasn't the plan. That was my plan. And so I met Kelly, and we met at church, and that was also not my plan. We used to go to dinner after the Saturday night service, and the group conveniently stopped offering to give Kelly rides in their car to go to dinner. They knew I'd be last to get out of there because I had to pack my stuff up, and I'll take you. And I started to get to know Kelly. And I had auditioned to be a bass player on Carnival Cruises because, again, I wanted to do music full time. And I don't ever hold this against her, and so I think that's been one of those weird things. But I was ready to sign up to go on Carnival Cruises to play when I really realized I didn't want to be gone for 6 months or more because of Kelly. So she didn't hold me back. She didn't stop me from doing anything. I was supposed to stay. And so we got married, and we got married very simply. We just got married. We just did it. One Saturday night at a service, in the middle when we do announcements, boom, you're married, right? And then we went on with our life. And so we didn't have a big honeymoon. We didn't have a big wedding, but the church choir said, you know what, we want to give you guys a honeymoon. And they sent us to Las Vegas, Nevada. Right. So imagine this. I would have probably never come to Las Vegas on my own, right? Now we're coming here for a week, all expenses paid, to just have a vacation, have a honeymoon. And I didn't journal it at the time, but I almost want to say that on the flight back, I said, I think we need to move to Las Vegas. It was in our first year of marriage, by the way, that we picked up our entire family and we moved. And why did we move to Las Vegas? We stayed on the Strip, so it's not even like it was like, wow, I love the Strip, it's so awesome. We were in a room at the Excalibur that faced west, away from the Strip. And we'd wake up in the morning and we'd open up the curtains and we'd just be looking and we'd be like, dude, there's actually a city here. Can you believe that? It's not just the Strip. There's stuff going on. And I started to feel this tugging, this pulling here that I couldn't explain, that I was supposed to go to Las Vegas. And how do you prove to anybody that you're being called to go to Las Vegas? And I heard a lot of people saying, actually, you probably just want to go there because it's a cool place and you're a musician. Well, yeah, it's a cool place and I'm a musician. But I feel like there's something more for us in Las Vegas. I have no idea what it is, but I know there's something more for us. And so you start to question things, right? And then you pray about things. And how do you pray about that sort of a change for your life? Do you pray for it? God, tell me it's the right thing to do? Well, if you know anything about confirmation bias, if you pray for it, you're always going to see a reason to go. So do you pray against it? God, just tell me if it's not the right thing to do. Just tell me if it's not the right thing to do. Well, you're going to find reasons not to go if you pray for or against. You're going to just follow your own path. And so, without really any guidance, I just knew that I didn't want to tell myself that I knew what was going on. And I would say, God, whatever your will is, whatever I'm supposed to do next, just let me know. And if it's to chill here in the same town as my parents and family, great, we'll chill here. And if it's to go 2,800 miles away, where we have nothing lined up, no jobs, nothing, then I'll go. And almost every single time that I buckled down and really prayed about it and prayed that way, I got an immediate answer. So one day I was at work, I worked in manufacturing, and I was like kicking major butt, right? Like I was meeting quota, I had no problem with my job, but my manager came up right after I prayed that and just started complaining about something stupid. That's like, hey, you know what? Like if there's one guy in this whole shop you can trust to get the work done, it's me, and now you're like yelling at me about something. Well, there's a good chance then that I'm in a situation that I probably shouldn't be in, right? Like I think God sent Les up to my department to talk about something stupid, to tell me, hey man, maybe this isn't the thing for you. Not that you're doing a bad job, but there's something else for you. And then a few weeks later I prayed again. And our pastor told a story. She used to just tell really short stories. That was her whole message. And the story was that there was an older couple, and the husband just loved to sail, and he loved the water, but the wife was afraid of the water. So they had a sailboat, but it was just tied up at the dock. And one day the wife said to the husband, we should really go sailing. And the husband said, well, I know you're afraid of the water, and it's not your favorite thing, and we should probably it's fine. I've got the boat. I know I have it. I can go when I want to. And she said, no, we should go. And he said, no, the boat, it's safe where it is right now in this harbor. It's tied up. I don't have to worry about it. And she said, the boat wasn't made to be safe in a harbor. And I was sitting at church, and I had my guitar on behind the pastor when she tells this story, and I was just like, okay, I'm in a safe harbor right now. Like this story that she chose, completely separate of my situation, was God saying, you've got a good thing going on right now. You live in the same town as your family. You've got this job you've had for 5 years. Your twin brother, your older sister are still here. Your in-laws are here. There's such a support group here. You're safe, but you're not supposed to be here. And that was when I started to really use the language to Kelly, oh my gosh, I think we're being called to go to Las Vegas. And the questions came up, what are we being called for? I don't know. I didn't know. I couldn't explain it to her. But as the spiritual head of the household, she said, okay. And she didn't want to leave her family, right? She said, okay, I think this is what we're supposed to do. If you honestly believe this is where we're supposed to go, you're being called, let's go. And so we looked at the reviewjournal.com and found an apartment for $575 a month, did not know the areas of town, and it was in North Las Vegas, on Cheyenne, between Civic Center and Pecos. But it was $575 a month. That's in our budget, though we don't have jobs lined up. That sounds good. We rented a U-Haul trailer, and October 13th, we moved from Maryland. For 3 days, we drove our entire belongings across the country, and then we landed in Las Vegas, and we had nothing lined up for us. And we didn't just get jobs right away, so it wasn't like, okay, cool, this was the right thing to do. And we had really hard months, and our truck got repossessed. And every time that things got really, really hard, Kelly kept asking, do you still think we're supposed to be here in Las Vegas? And all I could do was pray about it and go, yeah, I think we are. And I found a church, Trinity, I can't even remember now, it's been so long. Trinity United Methodist Church on Jones that we started going to because we were Methodists back east. Don't hate, it's all right. No, I'm just kidding. And they needed a worship leader. And so I got on staff with there. I got a job in a really, really bad call center in town, but it was a job, and it paid the bills. And I was able to do worship leading, and I was able to grow in that respect, because I had never actually been a worship leader. I'd been a part of a band. And I was able to start growing in that area. And I found a really bad job that I stuck with for 3 years until I could leave that to do what I love to do, which is production work. So I did a bunch of shows in town and all fun stuff. And at the time I thought, man, I'm doing really great stuff. I'm doing awesome stuff, right? I'm so cool. But look at this. A year into getting the job with Trinity United Methodist Church, they changed pastors, because that's what the Methodist Church does. They have a committee and they just move you around. And I did not agree with the theology of this new pastor. So, well, this is great. I felt like God had given me this great job with this church. And now I don't like it. And now I cannot lead worship with this person beside me. So I have to make a hard decision to quit this job. And my wife was like, okay, do you still think we're supposed to be in Las Vegas? And I said, yes. I don't know why. But we're in the right place. So shortly after Trinity, I found a church in the Northwest called Grace Point. Has anybody heard of Grace Point? And I was looking on Craigslist. They were looking for a sound guy. I was a sound guy looking for a church. So I called, and the listing was under the name James. So I called and spoke with this guy, James, and he said, cool, we'll show up on Sunday, and we'll show you what we've got going on. And it was a mobile church. And in my opinion, coming from a small town, mobile church meant donated Radio Shack equipment. So I had this image in my head of the worst case scenario for a sound guy ever. Like rolling up with the worst little mixer, the worst everything. And I roll up and they've got like road cases. They've purchased a product that is a church production system. And I'm like, oh, this is pretty cool. Let's check it out. And I met James, who's nobody called him James. They called him Wojo. So I was like, hey, I'm looking for James. And like 4 people, including his wife, were like, James. Before somebody finally said, oh, wait, you mean Wojo, right? And that was week number 6 of their corporate services. And I got to be a part of leadership and the band at Grace Point for about a year and a half or so. And then I got a job with a really great company in town you might have heard of called Zappos. And I was not off on Sundays anymore. My off days were Thursdays and Fridays. So that kind of ended my Grace Point time. And I moved to Henderson, near where the original headquarters were. And at the same time, my wife was like, man, we really loved Grace Point and all the people there. We felt like we had a family there. Do you still think we're supposed to be here in Las Vegas? And I said, yeah, I think we are. And so we found a church called Green Valley United Methodist Church and started going there, and they needed help with their worship team. And so I got on staff with them so in hindsight, you could go, okay, you're a musician, you're competent, you got these jobs. And I look at the seasons that we've had in Las Vegas and I go, man, there's a reason that pastor came in. I was no longer supposed to be in that spot. And then it caused some friction and it was rough for a little while. But I still felt I was in the right place. Whatever was next. And I worked for Zappos for 10 years. 9.5 technically. It's easier to round up. And how can a job be part of your calling? Does that make sense? Yeah. I took a job as a customer service agent, by the way, with Big Earn actually as one of my leaders, which was awesome. So just doing customer service for Zappos, and it's such a different place, and the way that they focus on the way their organization operates. I mean, the fact that Jeremy mentioned core values, for a lot of organizations like this one, they aren't even thought about, or they're thought about once, put up on the wall, and never discussed again. What is culture really? And so I didn't just learn a call center job, I didn't just learn more about shoes than anybody really needs to know. I learned so much more, and I learned that there's this whole focus, there's this whole business need for organizations to change their culture. And we actually developed a team at Zappos doing just that. So for 7.5 years, I was with a team called Zappos Insights, building out a tour of the campus. Like, how fun is that to go tour an office building? People wanted it. And I got to build that. And I got to grow as a public speaker. Now, I'm going to be completely honest with you. If I didn't have my guitar on when I was 18 years old, I couldn't get up in front of people and talk. School projects, it was like, it's just awful. But Zappos said, you know what? You're always on stage. Whether you're giving people a tour of the campus, whether you're playing with your band, when you're talking to people in the hallway, you have this aura about you. You just want to present, you want to help people think differently. So we want to put you on stage. And for 6 years, the last 6 years that I was there, I was the culture evangelist for Zappos. I spoke around the world representing that brand. But it wasn't just about Zappos, right? Originally the story was, let's tell the Zappos story. But pretty early on it was, there's so much more to culture and what organizations need. And I grew into a personal brand of a culture evangelist. And I still do that, actually, although it's a different part of the story. So we'll move along to expanding our family. Has anybody ever had a hard time having kids? You don't want to discuss it, I know. It's hard. We had a really hard time. When we finally, by the way, when I was going to have a different aunt coming to every family event, I also didn't want to have kids, right? And then one day, we had discussed it as we grew older. And I still was like, I don't really feel like I need to have kids. And then one day, it was just put on my heart, and I said, Kelly, I think we should do it. We should have a kid. And then you guys know the kids are easy, right? So we had to go through a couple of rounds of in vitro, just for different reasons. And it almost seemed like we weren't supposed to have a kid. That's a tough pill to swallow, right? But we ended up having Imogen, and Imogen was born 30 weeks, so she was 10 weeks early, which was really scary. She was 2 pounds, 3 ounces. You can see that she has all these wires and whatnot going on. Her first 8 months were in Sunrise Hospital in the NICU. Boy, do you really think we're supposed to have a kid? Right? She is the most awesome blessing that we could have ever asked for. And she is, by all accounts, extremely delayed. She's not sitting on her own. She's not speaking. She's 2.5. She's not running around, tugging on your shirt, going, Daddy, 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 and all those things. But she's been the most amazing blessing. Because she didn't just come into our family. She showed us who our family was. She showed us that we had a family at the church that we're going to now. It's the Life Baptist Church up in the south. We get around, by the way. Down in the southeast. But it was our church family that I think really helped us get through what was the hardest time in my entire life. Was every day going between work and the hospital and home and the hospital. And even that, I can look back and go, you know what? God put her at Sunrise Hospital, which was technically between our house in Green Valley and Zappos downtown. Like when you really look at everything that's gone on, if you pay attention to what's going on, it's amazing what he's doing for you. And we had just this amazing support group. We had this amazing family at Life. And it wasn't even stuff that I can't think about stuff that they did for us. They were there for us. And then, when something happens like this and people go, oh my gosh, I feel for you. It must be so hard. You have no idea how hard it is. And so we didn't get a lot of it must be hard. We got, hey guys, we're praying for you. Is there anything we can do? Let us know. We're here for you. And that was it. And they came and visited. And they said, you are part of our family. So I used to joke when I was 18 and people talk about the church family, right? And I think that my church family at Christ United Methodist was like aunts and uncles. You see them every once in a while. You got to catch up with them. How are things going? This family was like brothers and sisters. And it's just awesome. To this day, I can't imagine. And I had a great relationship with Grace Point and that family. I had a great relationship for a while at Green Valley. But we were supposed to be at Life. There's also a young man who was hit on his bicycle on his way to school a week after Imogen was born. And I wouldn't wish either of these traumas on any family, but can you imagine that we now have a shared experience in the same church family? And as much as it sounds pretty bad to say it, we weren't the only ones going through something really hard. And when you have things that are hard, it really helps to find people who can relate. And through that experience, we met amazing people like Becky, who, when Kelly was going to a support group for heart moms, because Imogen had tetralogy of Fallot, which is a pretty major heart issue, she met Becky. Like, you can't say you lucked out, right? God said there's great people to support you. And if there's anything that Kelly really needs, that's what she needs. And then when you're being told to go yet again, right? I think I've done a pretty good job. Like I said, I'm a pretty bad Christian. I'll admit there's a lot of work that I can do. But when he says go, you go. And I was at Zappos, which is an amazing company. If you haven't paid a lot of attention to it, they really do treat people well. They've got such an amazing thing going on. But sometimes you just know it's time to go. Ernie, how did you know it was time to go? Besides the fact that you made great barbecue. Follow your passion. Yeah, and I'll be the first to admit, too, by the way, as a speaker, the follow your dream, follow your heart, follow your passion is such bad advice if it's not followed up with other parts to it, if you know who you really are. The same thing can be said about your calling. If you have ever felt called, and the Bible even tells you to look, does it make sense for your situation? It's very rare that God says you're going to go like a completely 180 degrees from the things that make you who you are. So if I feel called, does it make sense for my situation? Is it possible to happen? God can do miracles, but I can't, right? And the Bible says look for it. So after 9.5 years, I decided to leave Zappos. I just decided it was time, while things were still good in my brain, let's go. And I was going to write a book and just speak on my own. So that's a scary step with a medically challenged daughter. And I said, okay, I'm going to do it. And I'm just going to pay the bill for the insurance, which was the hardest part, really. And so I do. I speak on my own, and I'm writing a book. I'm taking my time with it. I've never written a book before, so I'll talk to Jeremy about how you do that. I've got, I think, 14 pretty good chapter outlines right now. And my approach, I've developed my own thing, so I'm not just going to be the Zappos guy again. And I've gone out and spoken on a handful of times this year on my own. So I know I can do it, right? So it can't be just me being awesome at speaking. It's got to be, you've got something to say, and I want people to hear your message. Otherwise, I wouldn't have left Zappos. Good money, good benefits, right? But then he also said, you know what? I'm going to take care of you, though, because writing a book doesn't pay the bills until it doesn't pay the bills. The speaking circuit can, but what I've learned through being a speaker for 6 years is that it's like a smarmy business. It really is. People who just do speaking, it's like 90% marketing yourself to get 10% speaking, right? And like half the time you end up developing a sales program that you try to get people to buy into. It's almost like you're developing your own pyramid scheme because speaking is also just such a hard business. And so I was sitting at home one day, probably working on my outline, when Pastor Paul Godhard from Life called me and said, hey, somebody just gave me an application. They're looking to see if I know anybody who's qualified for this position, and I'm reading through it, and it looks like you. So, cool, send me the link, right? And he sent me a link, and it was the production coordinator position at Henderson Pavilion. It was overseeing the technical aspects of everything that comes to the pavilion and all the city events. And I went, man, you know what? I would love to get back into production. It's work that I love. So talk about the follow your dream or do what drives you, that's right there. And I went into the interview pretty cocky, actually, because I'm 40 years old, and I realized that it's not an adversarial situation. If there's a good fit, we'll be working together. If there's not, cool, there's something else. And I told them, I said, hey, here's the deal. I'm a speaker, and I have to be able to do that. Obviously, if you have an event scheduled, I'm not going to book something, but I have to be able to do that. And there was no question. They were like, cool, awesome. And then I got the job, which kind of surprised me a bit, because I had never really been in charge of production stuff. I've always just worked in production stuff. And so now I'm Jon Wolske, culture evangelist. I'm Jon Wolske, production coordinator. I'm Jon Wolske, volunteer for 4 services every morning, except for this one, at Life Baptist Church. And I'm Jon Wolske, father of Imogen Madge. And I didn't do any of that. I get to reap the rewards of it. I have to put in the work now that I have it, right? But when I look back and go, oh my gosh, look at this story, I didn't do any of it. I just said, okay, I'll do what you say I should do. And I prayed about it. I wasn't like, hey, this sounds cool, I'm going to go do it. It was like, man, let me nail it down. And when my wife asks, and she might still ask, well, she hasn't in a few years, we'll knock on wood. If she asks, do you think we're still supposed to be in Las Vegas? I think she would even agree at this point. The support we have through Sunrise and the Children's Heart Foundation and Life Baptist Church and churches like Downtown Faith that we know people in, we're supposed to be here. And who knows where we're supposed to be next? When we're supposed to go, we have to be willing to say, I'm listening. So the idea worth discussing today, I think, is really listening. Because if we listen to what the world is saying, good Lord, we're in trouble, right? The world is saying so many things today. If we listen to what people say, if we listen even to what the Bible says only with our ears, and we don't listen with our heart, we don't listen for context, we don't ask questions and dig deeper and pray about it, then we're only getting a part of the story. And there's an amazing story there for you if you learn to listen a little more deeply. Does that make sense? Well, guys, thank you so much for letting me share. I want to pray, if that's all right, before we get into discussion. And then I look forward to being part of the discussion.